The environment that you're in right now is not natural. It's not ideal. It's not something that is actually leading to quality connections.
These systems have been created to make sure that anyone can live without
Being connected.
Yeah.
The problem with that is that was a very natural incentive for building relationships, is that you had to build relationships in order to survive. It was just necessary to support each other. Whereas now it's like relationships are just recreational. Like, I hang out with this person because they're fun. So then if they're not fun for 1 minute, then you're like, this is over. I am done.
One of the big worries and conversations these days, especially on the internet, is about the loneliness epidemic. And many people, including Jonathan Haidt, have been pointing the finger at just technology. And I think it's less about technology and more about what's causing us to increasingly isolate ourselves, so that our only form of communication is technology.
Yeah, well, saying technology or social media or the internet isn't actually an answer. Because you have to answer, okay, why? What is it actually doing? And I think what it's doing is it's changing the incentives in the environment and our culture more broadly. And I think that, we recently went to Hillsborough, Illinois.
Visit some family.
Yeah, you would not have heard of Hillsborough, Illinois.
Hillsborough, Illinois is basically code for the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it's a very small town, but it's also a nice little, quaint spot. We really enjoyed our visit there, and it was really eye-opening in terms of, generally in these small towns, the people there kind of are looking at those in the big cities as like, oh, these are the people who have made it, and it's like, oh, the big cities have all the nice restaurants and the amenities and all of those sorts of things.
The wealthy places.
Yeah, and we were looking at the people there, the environment there, and just thinking, this is so much better.
Yeah.
Like, we just felt so much happier, more peaceful and just connected being around these people who look at you when you pass them in the sidewalk and say good morning,
even if they don't know you.
Yeah, and it's just in all the simple things, my dad was driving around and he just put his little finger up, and then the other person put their little finger up, and he was just because he grew up in that kind of environment,
Small town environment.
Yeah, and it was something that I think, for us growing up in this area and in a bigger city, we were just not used to that. It was kind of a culture shock, but in a really, really good way. And we just recorded a podcast on this gym sign that we found. And if
ridiculous gym sign.
Yeah, and if you watch that podcast, you'll understand what we're talking about. All about this gym sign. Yeah, but I think that, in that podcast, we were talking a lot about how our modern environment is different than our historical environment. This is a recurring theme throughout a lot of our podcasts, because it is just so important in understanding why we are here in the environment that we are now. And I really wanted to talk about kind of 8 factors that has been a culmination of conversations over the past 5 years since the beginning of the pandemic, where we were really exploring what is happening to our relationships, what is happening to our communities, and why is it so broken? Because it's not that, oh, the phones are forcing us to stay in our rooms. The phones are
evil.
Yeah.
They will destroy your life and
phones...
kill everyone you love and just decimate the world and set everything on fire. It's
the phones have kidnapped us and locked us in our rooms. That's not what's happening. It's about choices that we're making, and what are our choices influenced by, and it's heavily influenced by our environment. And I think that when it comes to what are these factors, one is permanence. This is something that has been a really big struggle for us, is that we've engaged with hundreds of people, if not thousands, honestly, over the past 5 years about our solutions, whether they were interested in the school or our platform, or just other things that they came in contact with. And many of them, the vast majority of them, were not long-term relationships that we really still have to this day. And the reason why is because it's become so easy to move on from relationships and not continue to build on them,
just leave. Like, it's not like before you couldn't really move because your neighbors
that was your social security
social
system.
security,
that was your credit market,
your community. Everything was dependent on each other. And now that's not the case. You've got insurance, you've got technology, which ironically, it's like technology allows you to communicate and like engage and like easily make friends because you are able to talk to like anybody in the world.
Well, knowing about your local environment was so important. About like, I know I can trust this person to make, good food at this tavern or something. Whereas if you were to move, you don't have Yelp to look up reviews. Like you needed to have people around you that you trusted to tell you about who to trust and where to go and what was safe. Without that, you were just totally blind to operate in an environment that was very much about the physical locality, and because of that, you had this permanence of relationships because people didn't move. That wasn't a thing, you know, like that. People lived and died within 20 miles of where they were born up until very, very recently. And so the next kind of factor is support, because that was something that, we've also mentioned in the past, is like, when we had our house fire, we didn't need our neighbors to support. Our neighbors were incredibly supportive. They donated us like 8 bags of clothes overnight and, took us in. But like if we had horrible relationships with our neighbors, it wouldn't have been a problem because we had insurance.
We had hotels.
Right? Yeah.
We had, of course, it did make it feel more familiar, but like, I don't want to like downplay what they did for us because it was really helpful. But, anyone could have had a house fire, and if they could have just gotten a hotel, Target's right there, get some clothes, and it's like, and then you'd have insurance, right? And it's so anyone could pretty easily, go through that experience without that much financial struggle. And it was just these systems have been created to make sure that anyone can live without
being connected. And that the problem with that is like, that was a very natural incentive for building relationships, is that you had to build relationships in order to survive. Like that, it was just necessary to support each other. And so another kind of aspect of this is the resilience of relationships, because we were watching this show called 100, and it's where like 100 prisoners.
I wasn't watching.
You were watching it, but like 100 prisoners are like dropped down to see if Earth is habitable, and there's a whole backstory to that. But basically, like you had all these people who were doing like horrible things to each other, and then were still like just working together,
just like chums in the end.
Because you had to, like, they literally like threatened to kill each other or like almost killed each other, and like going through like horrible relationship struggles. Like if somebody tried to kill you now, you would not be friends with them under any circumstances.
And the police would come in. They'd probably get a life sentence in prison. Like these days, it's just, there's so much structure around you that people are just kept in line.
But now it's like when it comes to the resilience of relationships, part of it is that you had these relationships because you needed them, whereas now it's like relationships are just recreational. Like I hang out with this person because they're fun. So then if they're not fun for like 1 minute, then you're like, this is over, I am done. Like it's like literally
they do one little thing that's offensive, and because that's like the bar for things that would make you end the relationship. Like before it was like, trying to kill you, you know,
Yeah.
or doing something else like stealing from you.
Right.
But because all those things are kept in line, and other reasons like just being able to really easily leave, then one little offensive thing and all of a sudden this is done.
Yeah.
This is over.
Yeah.
We are now on a text-only relationship.
Yeah, it's just something where any bump in the road, it's gone. And that's another thing that basically makes it so that it's impossible to actually connect with people, because if people are just coming in and out of your life, your relationships are not resilient. People don't have any reason to support you. Why would you feel comfortable being vulnerable with them?
Yeah.
Right? And we're not. You know, we don't think that we can be vulnerable with other people, and for good reason. You know, like when it comes to, should I be vulnerable with this next person when, like, on average my relationships last like 6 months to a year, you know, they're going to be gone and out of your life. It's like getting a new therapist. Like, you got to like tell them your whole life story again.
Yeah.
You know, it's like that's exhausting and it's painful, and it should be, because before, you know, falling out of a relationship was really consequential. You know, that was your support network. And it should still be our support network, except that we have these alternatives, right? And we fall for the alternatives because they're far more predictable than human beings.
I think your teacher, I think you told me this, and this is how I remembered, like a few years ago, I remembered to spell friends with the end at the end.
Oh.
Because your teacher was like, friendships have end at the end because friendships always end.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's like nice little lesson to teach all your students. Make sure they have no hope for their relationships. Yeah.
It was helpful in terms of in terms of spelling, but
not a good takeaway. But yeah, another thing that's been completely lost is wisdom. Not in the sense that all wisdom is lost, but in the sense that we don't know where that source of wisdom is. And it was before that if you had these tight-knit communities where people didn't move, you knew everybody around you, and also the world didn't change so very fast. Like now, the world is changing at an unprecedented rate, but it's like before that wasn't the case. So the people with the most wisdom were just generally the people who were older, because they had more experience, and it was very clear. You knew, like, the elders, like, you were supposed to respect your elders.
And my father's father. This story has been passed down through the generations onto you, Timmy.
Yeah, and it's like you knew who those people were. You listened to those people. Those people were respected, and they kept the communities functioning. You know, they were able to moderate and mediate the engagements between people, because they were also heavily involved and rooted into the relationships and the connections that you had. And that was incredibly important in terms of knowing who knows things, you know? And now it's like, I don't know, like, how are you supposed to find that now when it's like you have a million different news sources and they're all saying different things?
You don't really even care. You don't know that person either. Yeah. It's like some lady named Cheryl wrote this essay about something you found interesting. You don't know Cheryl. You don't care about Cheryl.
Cheryl doesn't care about you. Yeah. So another thing that has also been really, really hard to find is shared stories, and throughout history, those shared stories generally came from the Bible or shared experiences of the community. And now it's like everybody is kind of fragmented into whatever they're seeing from their social media feeds. And it's really hard to therefore have a shared understanding, a shared paradigm, a shared language to try to connect with people. So that's also incredibly isolating. Another thing is actually understanding, like, for somebody to actually understand you, if, you know, they just came into your life. Like, before, if you had people who knew your entire life, like, of course you're going to have a much better understanding of who you are if they've been engaging with you, if they've been supporting you and you've been supporting them to survive, and you're part of the community, and you know them, but you also know their family members, and they know you, and they also know your family members. And it's like all of that to actually create a shared basis of understanding, not to mention the shared stories and the shared language and the shared paradigm and culture to help with that. Like, the depth of understanding was just on average, way, way higher than what we have now. And the last thing that I think is a big factor of why we've lost these quality relationships and communities is positive incentives for people to actually want to, especially raise children together as a tribe and as a community, in terms of like the children around you knew were going to grow up and be the people that you hunted with, that you gathered with, that you fought with, that supported you and you supported them. Like this was something that people knew was in their best interest to try to make sure that those children were competent and strong and reliable, right? Because otherwise you're gonna ask them to do something and it's like they didn't do it, and it's like that has real consequences for you. Now it's like you have oftentimes a lot of raising children is outsourced to schools, where you have teachers who are underpaid and overtaxed in terms of this responsibility for 30 children that aren't your own, that you're not going to work with, you're probably never going to see again after they move on to the next grade. Like, where's the incentive here, right? And so those are kind of the 8 things that I was thinking about in terms of how different the environment is when it comes to trying to build these communities. And the biggest sad thing about what we're facing today is that people don't know that it's unnatural. People don't know that this is an environment that is stacked against us to make us isolated. And so we don't have any hope. We think that there's something wrong with us. Or that it's just meant to be, that we're just supposed to be lonely and unhappy with our relationships.
And we're not going out of our way to try and recreate that environment with our neighbors, with our friends.
Yeah, and I mean, some people are, but it's just, the problem is that the environment is working against you in every single way. And so a lot of those people are just losing hope. And I think that part of what we want to share is that we have a lot of hope for how this can improve. Because everybody wants to have quality connections. Everybody wants to be understood. Everybody wants to feel as though there are supportive people in their lives. It's just we've become totally lost in terms of how to get there. The biggest thing to understand is what are the incentives that we need to recreate in terms of recreating those natural incentives in that natural environment. And one is understanding that you need to be able to invest in your relationships in a meaningful way in order for you to think that they're going to last. Because I think that part of what's difficult is that if you just have relationships for the purpose of like watching football every Friday, you're not investing in that relationship. That person can disappear next week. It won't matter.
Yeah, you'll just forget about them.
Yeah, and I think that part of it is like, okay, what is the investment that I'm talking about? One is emotional investment, is being vulnerable with other people and helping them to create a very deep shared understanding of each other, because once you have that, like, that's a very special thing to have shared understanding with another person, because you then just have a huge capacity to help each other navigate life and just, all those things that they can help you with if they have that understanding. But another that we're thinking about in terms of from a technology perspective is investment in terms of data, in terms of talking about, like, if you have something in which you are actually sharing yourself authentically, whereas it's like, what is the data that Facebook has? Like, they have family photos in an occasional like quote from Lord of the Rings or something, that it's just like, that's not really an actual representation of you
and your life.
Yeah, whereas part of what we're thinking about is also trying to reduce the jumping from platform to platform and basically cutting off a whole social network when you're doing that, right? Whereas I think that what we're trying to do with our platform is like, how can you invest your data meaningfully in a way that you're able to create not only a social network, but potentially, a machine learning algorithm that's there to help to try to work for you in terms of being able to connect you with the people that you would actually want to engage with, but also that shared data in terms of, these are the projects that we worked on together, like with you and all of your friends. Like there's all these projects and memories that you've shared together, but also stored together in one place that makes it really hard to walk away from, right? To like delete an account after all those meaningful memories were created, after all of that connection has been documented, is something that is I think important in terms of how to create that natural incentive, because that can be something that makes it evident, like, this is somebody I should care about, that I should be trying to stay in touch with.
Yeah, like my friend Chloe, she like we've done so many projects together and like been on so many calls and done like talks and just generally things that are valuable, that looking back on all these projects I can see like, oh yeah, I did that with Chloe and I did this with Chloe. And it's really hard for like it's so obvious now, the history that we built up together and the value and the relationship.
Yeah, and a big part of what you've also gone through with Chloe is that you guys had a lot of shared goals together, and that's one thing that has been totally neglected in terms of, if you're thinking about relationships in terms of recreation, that's not really a very meaningful shared goal of like, let's have fun together. But it's like, if you're actually trying to achieve something together, that's something that can really help in terms of the permanence, the resilience, and also the depth of that relationship. And that's something that I think also relates to kind of the shared culture and the shared values of like, what do we want out of life? And then therefore more practically, now what do we want out of this week? And how can we help each other with that? And how can we work together in meaningful ways to try to help each other achieve these valuable goals? And there's so many reasons why that doesn't exist today, which is that people aren't thinking about their goals. People aren't thinking about their values. And there's no basis for a shared culture to try to craft that together. And that's part of what we're thinking about, is like, what can that shared culture be? How can we build these shared stories? And that's something that we've talked about. This might make for a great separate podcast, is how do we make shared stories out of these popular like TV shows and movies? That's something we've been exploring more recently, is like, you have all these really popular shows like, Game of Thrones,
that like everyone,
Harry Potter, and like all these people are watching it, but
Ted Lasso.
Yeah, but it's really hard to actually be able to have that be a meaningful shared story until we actually think about what are the implications and what does this actually mean. So there's a lot of solutions that we're thinking about in terms of how do we recreate those natural incentives. But I think that the most important thing that I want people to take away from this podcast is that the environment that you're in right now is not natural. It's not ideal. It's not something that is actually leading to quality connections. And it's not something we should be content with, because we're going to be far less effective and happy if we don't have quality relationships and community in our lives. And to understand why that's the case, and that it's not your fault. It's not your fault that these relationships aren't working out and disappearing and not actually bringing you fulfillment, right? That's not something that you asked for, to be born into this environment, and yet here we are, and I think that the most important thing we can do is to recognize that and to move forward with that in mind.